Now, John, this isn't John the Baptist. We looked at this last week. He writes down what he saw and what he believes about Jesus. Now, he does this so that we can make up our own minds about who Jesus is. So we can make up our own minds about who Jesus is. He writes at the end of his book, he writes this. He says, "These things are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah," and the Messiah is the King of God's people, or God's chosen person. Okay, Messiah, the Son of God, and by believing you may have life in his name, or because of what he's done, because of who he is. So remember, we're here because we believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and we think it's really important that we give you an opportunity to explore that for yourself. Now remember, we're not here to brainwash you, we're not here to try and make you think what we think. We're here to give you what we think is true and the evidence, and for you to make up your own mind about it. Now John, in this next bit, he records the story of John the Baptist. Okay, hands up, who of you have heard of John the Baptist before? Some of you have heard of John the Baptist. Okay. Now John the Baptist was a bit weird. Okay, he stood out from everyone else. He wore weird clothes, he had a really weird diet, and he was doing some pretty weird things. So the Jewish leaders from the main city, what they did was they sent out some people to go and ask him, "Who are you?" Now I've got some people who are going to help me out reading today's little bit of the Bible. So guys, if you come out, give these guys a round of applause. Thank you very much, guys. Good work. Okay. So here's the first thing. Okay, John thinks that God is arriving. Okay, John thinks that God is arriving. Now the Jews, they knew their Bibles well. Okay, they knew their Old Testament really well, and they knew that God had said that he was going to send someone who was going to be a Messiah, or someone who was going to be their king. So the first question they asked John the Baptist is, "Are you the king? Are you the Messiah? Are you the one that we've been waiting for?" What's his reply? Nope. Okay. Well, in that case, are you Elijah? Because he's an Old Testament prophet that didn't die, and you dress like him, and you eat like him, and you sound like him. So is that you? And he's like, no. And they're like, okay, what about the prophet? Okay, the prophet is someone who speaks from God, is someone who's going to help us to understand who God is. And he's like, no. And they're like, well, who are you? Why are you here? Why are you different from the other people around you? Now, imagine that you went into Starbucks. Okay, imagine that you went into Starbucks, you were going to get your coffee. All right, other coffee shops are available. You use Starbucks for this. Yeah. Or coffee number one. There we go. We use coffee number one as an example, okay? Coffee number one. Because Beth's working there. Coffee number one, okay. You walk in and you see someone sat down on a table next to you. She's a firewoman and she's fully dressed up in like the protective gear. Okay, she's just sat there with a coffee. Okay, now you walk in, you order a drink, you go and sit down. Now what are you wondering? Okay, what you're wondering is, why is she there? Doesn't that, like, you would ask that question, wouldn't you? Why are you dressed up? It's not normal that you would dress up to do something normal in special gear. So why is John in his special gear? Why is he different? Why is he standing out from the crowds? Well, John replies to their question, and he says, "I am the voice of one calling in the wilderness. Make straight the way for the Lord." Now the Lord there is God, basically. So he's saying, make straight the path for God. Who are you? God is arriving. God is going to come to you. He's going to arrive soon. Now, as a big group together, I just want you to shove your hands up for this. What would you do if you knew that the Queen was going to come to your house tomorrow? Okay, what would you do? So tonight, you hear the news. Okay, a kind of gold stamped telegram comes through your letterbox saying she's gonna pop over to see you tomorrow evening. Okay, now what would you do? Hands up. I mean, amazing. So if you knew that the Queen was coming, you would do something special, wouldn't you? Now have a think about this. Have a think about this. What would you do if someone told you that God was going to arrive and meet with you tomorrow night? What would you do then? See, what John was doing is he was baptizing people. And so what he was saying was he was using water as a symbol for the people to say that they believed in God and what he was saying. That's what he was doing. That's what John the Baptist was doing. So what would you do if you knew that God was going to come and meet with you tomorrow? So actually that's what you're going to discuss together now. So why don't you spend a minute just discussing that. If God was going to meet with you tomorrow night, what would you do to prepare? And what would you say to him? Okay? What would you do to prepare? And when he turned up at the door, what would you say to him? Hello. Okay, so why don't you discuss that for a minute and we'll come back together after that. Okay, so first thing, John the Baptist thinks that God is arriving. Okay, and secondly, he thinks that God is arriving in an unexpected way. Now, if you were God, okay, if you were God, you're not by the way, but if you were God, I'm thankful for that, and you're thankful that I'm not God too. If you were God and you were going to let people know that you existed, what would you do? If you were going to let people know that you existed, what would you do? Now, I heard a guy this week who said that he just couldn't believe that God wouldn't make it more obvious that he existed. He said, why doesn't God just write it in the sky? Or why doesn't he write on every single human being made by God? Okay? Just here or something, okay? So he just writes on every human being made by God. That's a good question, isn't it? He just couldn't believe in God because he thought that God could do it better. Now, as a Christian, I would argue that God has done. He just hasn't used our dictionary to do it. Our world is amazing and the human body is incredible. And if you look at it, I think it points towards a designer. And the Bible thinks that too. Now, John says that God is going to arrive. How might God do that? Now, he might arrive in a grand way. He might arrive in a tornado, okay, that's on fire. Okay, he might arrive in a fire-nado.
Full of sharks.
Okay, full of cooked sharks. Yeah, or maybe he's going to arrive in a huge earthquake. It could be that he's going to arrive in a huge earthquake. Well, what does John say? John says, among you stands one you do not know. He is the one who comes after me, the straps of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. How was God going to arrive? Well, to have sandals, you need to have feet. And to have feet, you need to have legs. We could carry on. You need to be a human, don't you? So he was saying that God is going to be a human, and he's saying that actually he was already there. Among you is one that you do not even know. He said he was already in the Jewish nation, and he said that he was so great that John the Baptist wasn't even worthy to do a servant's job and untie the manky bits of lace that was holding his shoes to his feet. Okay? So we've seen that John thinks that Jesus is God, that he's light and he's true. We saw that last week. And today we've seen that John the Baptist thinks that God is going to arrive in an unexpected way. He's going to arrive as a human. Now remember what we looked at the start, okay? Who is most important in your life? Who do you learn from most? Well, for John the Baptist, it was God. And we're going to find out next week who's talking about. But now we're just going to discuss on your tables, just in your life groups, quickly, these last few questions, okay? Why is it better for God to arrive as a person rather than in some other way, like a tornado that's on fire with sharks in it? Okay? Then I want you to ask your leader, why do you think that Jesus is that important? Okay? Why do you think that Jesus is that important? As John the Baptist thought that Jesus was. And what is the best way to help people think about Jesus? Okay, what is the best way to help people think about Jesus? Okay, so spend a few minutes just in your life groups, and then together we will finish up there.